Hi, it is Tuesday, May 14th, 2019, and this is dun dun dun, the Pro and the Con Show. And my name is Michael James Ott. I am your host. Um, so the intent of the show is we spend a few minutes, 15 to 20 minutes each day, looking at the news and really trying to get to the news, which is who, what, where, and when. That's the facts. Anything else pretty much beyond that is commentary and opinion, and opinions, like forecasts are worth a little bit, but not very much. So the facts, and then you can form your own opinions, okay, equipped with the facts. And that's why I keep saying, embrace the whole truth, the pro and the con, the good and the bad, the for and against. So normally I'd be looking through 5 different websites, some of them leftward leaning, some of them rightward leaning, some kind of mostly known for not being too biased, and would compare how they're presenting the information, so we can see how the bias is being introduced in there. And then some days, though, the news cycle is a little bit slow, or it's being kind of repetitive, and it's time to talk about one of the major issues that faces the country. And in this particular case, actually, is a few days ago, and it's kind of an ongoing thing. There's been a handful of I think it's either 3 or 4 now, states with Republican-leaning or conservative-leaning legislatures and governors that are voting on some new bills around abortion. And so there, of course, abortion is a very solemn and contentious issue, very emotional issue. And so I've been trying to address that over the last handful of days, last few days. And I think today is the 4th and final part of a 4-part series on abortion. And, previously we talked about there's some factors here that we try to balance. So the balance of choice about having sex and then maybe or may not having an abortion, and what really defines human life. And then, the abortion basically being the ending of potential human life, and how much potential does that life have? And that gets to the chart that I showed last show, which says that, in the first, 2 or 3 weeks of after conception, the rate at which, I guess they're called zygotes at that point, but basically the very embryonic pregnancy is, it's pretty highly likely that it will suffer some kind of catastrophic issue, and you will end up with a miscarriage. And really, it's so early in the pregnancy that the woman doesn't even know she's pregnant very often, and secondly, she would never know that she's having a miscarriage, because at this point, you would talk about hundreds or thousands of cells compared to whatever, I think it's billions or something in the human body. Anyway, so we talked about those factors, and then we talked about the reasons why women. So it was data driven, right? Someone asked, I think it was 1,000 women who had said that they'd had abortion, the reasons for, and the number one reason given by 40% of the women was financial. Okay, and there was various other ones, and again, previous shows, you can look through that. And then the reasons against abortion, which we covered in the last show. And then the main thing that I wanted to point out, that's the factual information that I don't know that a lot of people know. I certainly didn't know it before I did some research, is for sure in that first handful of weeks after a sperm inseminates an egg, okay, or fertilizes an egg, that's a very unstable period in the pregnancy. And in fact, it seems like it's pretty solidly true that 75 or even 80%, and then the paper said they're even concerned it could be higher than that. It's just difficult to know because there could be, for example, some conception events that are so quickly fail that no one knows that they occur. But anyway, the bottom line is, for sure, 75 or 80% of the time, in those first weeks, that new conceived embryo is not going to make it. It very quickly will have an infant failure, if you will, we say in the engineering terms. So anyway, so all of that in history, then what do we do about abortion? And so it comes to the topic that I want to talk about in this evening's topic. All right, so one of the things, and again, you'll hear me say this over and over and over again, you keep watching the show going forward, is we don't address things in a holistic way. We have a tendency to say, well, let's just do this. For example, in all the arguments over gun ownership and so on, and Second Amendment rights, we're gonna legislate and make bump stocks illegal, or we're going to make assault rifles illegal. Just little, and use the analogy, rifle shots, BB shots, bing, bing. But the main concern that people have about guns, I mean, there's a lot of crime that occurs with them and so on. But one of the main things that people are very upset about, and rightly so, is the mass shooting thing. And you could step back and say, okay, well, there's a lot of things actually that we could do to try to thwart the mass shooting thing, other than, well, let's just get rid of assault rifles. It's not an adequate thing. It's not a holistic approach. So going back to abortion, so there's other things that are generally true. One is that there are too many people on the planet, and the birth rate is too high, and the population on the planet is growing. Very soon will be 8 billion people on the planet, where a little over 100 years ago there was only 1 billion. So that's growing rapidly. It's causing all kinds of trouble, just in trying to feed people and stuff like that. And then, of course, there's a whole lot of poor people, and those people end up getting angry, and that can be a big contributor to like terrorist activities and these kinds of things. So the world is a complex place, and one of the things that's true is our birth rates are too high. Now in this country, it's not too high. We're kind of a little bit less than replacing ourselves here, if I understand correctly. But on the whole, in the earth, around the globe, it's definitely true. And then the second thing is, the United States, supposedly one of the better medical systems in the world, and certainly one of the richest nations in the world, and yet the rate of serious health issues in infants is quite high relative to several other countries that have much better records in regard to healthy birth rates and healthy children, post birth and stuff like that. And I don't know the exact numbers, but it's for sure true. And I want to say we're like of the so-called developed nations, nations like Germany and Japan and so on, Italy and others, and there's 30 or 40 of them where the economy is kind of similar to ours. We rank, I don't know, like 6th or 8th or something is the number that's coming to my head. I don't know it for a fact. I'd have to look it up. But anyway, the point is we could definitely improve on the care of women during pregnancy and the care of children immediately following pregnancy, these things could be a big improvement. And then we have the issue of abortion and what to do about it. So again, to try to look at this in a holistic approach, and so here's what I'm suggesting you do. So I've tried to spend a few days now talking about the facts around this, the pros and the cons, the good and the bad, the for and against, some real information. Now, given that information, given the fact that people like to have sex, but we don't really want to have all those pregnancies, given that abortions can be performed safely, but should they? And this thing about where does life start, and given the fact that in the first weeks of a pregnancy, right after conception, well, it's only true that life starts with conception like 20% of the time ish, okay? And then the fact that we could do better at taking care of children and helping mothers and so on. So from that perspective, from the idea of taking a more holistic approach, I just wrote down a few things here, and I'll just read them through, and then I'll show it on the screen so you can get a picture of it if you'd like. But I would propose, it would seem to make sense to me, one, to get women. I mentioned in a previous show that really women, it is such a unique thing that they should really be driving any discussion around this. And I don't mean to take that from them. I'm just sometimes offering a straw man proposal. It can be helpful. So in that spirit, in the spirit of trying to be helpful, a straw man proposal would be a comprehensive approach. So you would have a three-phase approach. So you'd have pre-pregnancy care, pregnancy care, and post-pregnancy care. And because we need to improve in all those areas, and we would want to make it available so that the poor, would have availability to it and so on. These would be government subsidized. So pre-pregnancy care would be a subsidized common birth control methods availability and annual education for people that are of age, that they potentially could be having sex and therefore having children. You could get out of that if you, for example, had a permanent surgery to for example, have a vasectomy or something like that for a man. You could, prove that you'd had that procedure and you wouldn't have to do the annual education anymore and so on. But for the vast majority of people that are in the ages where they could either cause a pregnancy or become pregnant, there would be this birth control methods and annual education, and the subsidy could be large enough. If you were poor enough, you would get basically these services for free, but the more you made, the more you could afford and so on. So subsidized, but subsidized substantially for people of very low income, to try to help them through these issues and make sure their children are well cared for, and any babies that are born are healthy. So the next thing would be, underneath that pre-pregnancy, would be subsidized pregnancy tests. So every woman that wants to participate in either facilitation of adoption or an abortion or whatever, or the birth control program, they would do a weekly test. And the pregnancy tests now, wow, I mean, they are not expensive, and what we could come up with is a nationally standardized one that was biodegradable, and would, for sure, if there were millions of them being done every week, the cost would be less than $1. And every woman, again, under certain rules, would take the test, which is basically just urinating on a little something, and then seeing whether the test was positive and putting that in an envelope and mailing it off somewhere. And that would be the subsidized pregnancy test, so that women would know if they're pregnant. They would find out much earlier and be able to start looking at their options. So the next phase of this would be pregnancy care, and so subsidized pregnancy care, including adoption programs, would be generally available to all women. Day after sex treatments, so the so-called day after pill or something, and abortions in the first 5 weeks would be available after special education classes. So, and things happen, okay? One of the things that, we talk about choice. Well, you may have made the choice to, use contraception, and your condom rips, during the sexual act, and you're very concerned that your partner might be pregnant or whatever. And there's other things that can happen. People get drunk or something. They have a sexual encounter during a weak moment, and the next day they want to make sure they don't regret that. It would seem like it would be a reasonable thing to do. And then abortions after 5 weeks, generally not allowed unless cases where the choice was not available, like rape or incest, or say 100 days into the pregnancy or something, the obstetrician detects that there's some kind of very serious defect in the child, and that it's going to be a very, very bad experience for the child and the parents. In those cases, you could have an abortion. But the big thing then is generally this program would allow and have safe and relatively low-cost abortions, but they would be pretty infrequent. Okay, they would not occur very often because of this comprehensive approach around that to avoid that particular issue. And then post-pregnancy care would be this adoption program, which I already mentioned, but the government would have these subsidized adoption programs that were robust and fair and reasonable, and matching up families that are looking for children with parents, women that are having children and just don't feel like they can keep them for whatever reason, and want to make sure that they're getting placed into a good home. And then the last thing is, first 120 days of post-pregnancy care would also be government subsidized for the mother and the child. Again, these are critical times from just before pregnancy, through pregnancy, and just post-pregnancy, where there's a lot of things going on, and both the mother and the child really need a lot of care. So we could provide that on a regular basis. So I call it the comprehensive approach. Again, it's a straw man, and trying to step back on a more holistic view and trying to address all the issues. Remember, there's 340 million of us in this country, and so our viewpoints on the issue of abortion are going to vary. But over the last days and today, we've talked about some of the facts around it, and then I have, again, for the purposes of offering a straw man, I've offered this comprehensive approach. So I'll get this on the screen. I'll hold it still so you can see it. Okay. All right, so that's the show for today, May 14th, 2019. Again, my name is Michael James Ott. Thank you for watching. I hope you will continue watching. Thank you for opening your hearts and your minds to the premise that knowing things from different sides, pro and con, good and bad, for and against, will help you and the rest of us, all of us, move forward in a much more reasoned and reasonable way. Until the next show, I hope you have a great evening. Bye for now.